Welcome everyone to the webinar. This webinar is sponsored by the Interagency Outreach Training Initiative, which is an employment specialist project through the Center for Persons with Disabilities at the Utah State University. We're excited to have Jillian Morley here join us today to discuss job development and developing resumes, cover letters, and interviewing employers. She is an assistant director of career services at Utah State University. After I turn the time over to Jillian, she can provide some additional information in her background if she would like. But before I do that, I would like to point out a few features of Adobe Connect for those of you who are new to using this platform. On the left of your screen, you'll see the chat box where you are more than welcome to post questions about the topic that Jillian will be discussing today. We'll try to provide some of the answers to those questions as we go throughout the webinar, but if we miss any of those questions, we'll definitely hit those at the very end after she's concluded her remarks. Next to the chat box in the middle of the screen, you will see the slides for today's presentation. You have access to those slides, a PDF document. Right below that, you can download those files by selecting the Jillian's ppt.pdf file and then clicking download the file if you would like those slides. With that being said, I'll turn the time over to Jillian. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you everybody for being here today. I'm excited to share some knowledge with you and also hear from you. So like Corbin said, I work in career services at Utah State University. I've been there about 5 years now, and prior to being in the Career Center here at Utah State, I was at the Career Service Center at Arizona State University, and that's where I completed my Master's of Education in Higher Education, and I was with their center for about a year and a half. And then before that, I was at the University of Utah in their Career Center while I started my graduate degree and while I finished up my undergraduate as well. So I have about 7 years of experience working in career centers, helping students through the job search process. And I'm still I still love it. I really enjoy working with students and different community members that reach out to us to help them reach their career and professional goals. It's been really satisfying for me, so I'm really excited to share some more of this information with you. So after today, you're welcome to email me or connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd love to continue the conversation with you. If you have any questions or feedback, or if you have some different strategies you use that you really like, I would love to hear some of that. In our office, we really approach our career coaching as high tech and high touch. We really want to provide our clients with as many tools as we can, whether they're online resources, different handouts in our office, but we also want to do it with a high touch. We don't want our clients to feel like we're just giving them the information and telling them to go on their way and do it. We really want to have that personalized touch with them and help them through the whole process. So just to give you an overview of our presentation today, we'll talk about tailoring resumes and cover letters, how to approach networking, and also doing informational interviews. Through each of these topics, I'll give some ideas on how you can have the client really be interactive with you. And I've based all of that on how I have the students I work with interact with me so that I'm not creating and submitting their applications for them by myself. I want them to be completely involved in that process and really take the lead on it. So feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation. Just like Corbin said, we'll try to get through as many as possible while still being mindful of your time. So let's start with the basics on how to nail the resume and the cover letter. So the online job search isn't always the most effective way to be looking for jobs. I'm sure some of you have experienced that where you'll find these postings online and you'll submit applications, but you'll never hear back. And that's really true with so many of those online postings. So there's a few ways that we can make that online search more effective, and starting with tailoring the documents. So to tailor the documents, I really have the students I work with, and I'll say students or clients interchangeably, so hopefully that's okay with you. But I'll have the students really research the organizations before we start any application process. I want them to apply to jobs that they actually are interested in, not ones where they just need the job. And so by researching that organization, they can really find something to grasp onto, something they really care about. So I have them look at things such as their mission statement or their goals, just, Googling the organization even to see what information pops up. That gives them a good sense of what the company or organization is all about and why they might like to work there. And so I've also encountered situations where students will email me or come and see me in my office, just really frustrated by the application process. They'll tell me that they've applied for over 100 jobs online and they've had no feedback. They have had zero communication from employers setting up interviews. It's just kind of dead silence. And so usually the problem is that they're submitting the same exact resume and cover letter for any type of job. If they're applying for a job within the food service industry, maybe they're submitting the same application that they're sending to a real estate agent company. So that approach has not worked for those students, and tailoring that document, looking into those companies, that gives them a little bit of a different perspective. It helps them be more intentional. So one of the biggest things with their documents that we do is incorporate the keywords that they find. For example, if community service or community engagement is one of the values of the company, I really make sure that the student can highlight their community service experience on their resume or talk about that is one of their values in their cover letter. I want them to connect the dots for the employers a little bit more in those applications. So I have a question to ask you all. Corbin, if you could pull up the first poll. So NACE is the National Association of Colleges and Employers, and this is the main source that our team goes to for research and information. Employers filled out a survey and they selected, what are the most important skills for an employer to look for. So I want you to click which one you think is the number one most important skill employers want in a candidate. Awesome. Good, we're getting some good responses on here. Overwhelmingly, most of you are selecting the teamwork is the number one most important skill employers look for, and that's correct. Employers really want team members that can work well with other people. So if we look at, we'll look at the list of all of those skills now. So if we can slide that poll question back over, thank you. So this is the list of the top 15 skills that employers really look for in candidates across all industries. So you can see at the top, it's your ability to work on a team, your problem solving skills, your communication, which is first is written with verbal communication coming in at fifth, leadership, initiative, and so on. So I always talk about this list with students or clients. I want them to be thinking about how do I have these different transferable skills no matter what job I'm applying to. And I always like to point out to them that at 12 and 13 is technical skills and computer skills. So interestingly, in the past several years, those have fallen out of the top 10. And if you want to, some of you can go into the chat box and guess why those fell out of the top 10, just the technical and computer skills. Let's see what some of you have to say. See, I see some of you typing. Okay. Corbin, I'm not seeing responses yet. Do you see responses yet?
Sometimes it takes people a second to type and then
Okay,
enter, and then just make sure to scroll down.
okay.
Looks like we got a few responses being more flexible and able to work with them. Computer skills can be taught. The ability to relate and get along is more difficult.
Yeah.
Not everyone has that skill, but can be taught the way a specific employer would like them to.
Yeah, that is all spot on. So employers indicated that they would much rather have candidates that have those transferable skills such as the teamwork, the communication, the flexibility. They feel that those are the types of skills that are much harder to teach. They would rather hire someone with those transferable skills and then teach the technical or computer skills specific to their organization. Now, that's not true for every single position. Sometimes you really need those technical or computer skills first, but for the vast majority, the employers are more willing to teach those technical or computer skills. So, with this list of 15 skills, I like to go through them with my students that I'm working with and have them give me examples of when they've used different ones of these. That helps them be more reflective and think critically about their previous experiences, which they'll then translate onto their resume. But it also helps me understand the student better so that I can help them look for more strategic opportunities. I just get to know them a little bit better to understand their personality or their interests. So, having a conversation around these 15, even if you just pick a few of them, can be really helpful at the beginning stages of those interactions. Okay. Oh, and I wanted to say by talking about these with the client, if they can tell you a time when they've had great communication or great teamwork, it also, I've seen, just builds their confidence so they feel more comfortable working on their resume, looking at opportunities. They start to feel more qualified for some of those positions. So I want to start with resumes in terms of the documents that we'll look at. And there's two types of resumes that I really like to use. Before I work on a resume with a client, I ask them if their work experience is related to the job they're trying to get. If it is related, then I recommend that they use a traditional chronological resume. But if it's not related and it's more just transferable, I always recommend going with the skills based or the functional resume. So I'll show you an example of both of these and we'll go through the content a little bit and the formatting so you can see the differences and similarities. So Corbin, if you wouldn't mind expanding this screen so we can see those a little better. And these are in the PDF, so if you're having a hard time seeing them, you can download that and zoom in. So we have those two resumes on here, the chronological and the skills based. The chronological one is on the left, and that's Vanessa's, and then Jennifer's is the skill based. So these are two very simple formatted resumes. For most fields and most job applications, we recommend just using, very basic white background, black color, no different colors going on, no crazy fonts. We want it very straightforward so that the skills and in the content is what is really shining rather than having some of those design elements that might distract. So let's start with the chronological and go through what this looks like and just some general formatting tips. We always want to have the name at the top of the page, and we want that to be the biggest. And on these two samples, the name is a little smaller than what I would typically do, but I wanted it to fit on here for you. Then we want the contact info. So phone number, email, address if this person wants to, but it's optional. And LinkedIn, if they have a LinkedIn account, they can include their URL in that heading. So we want that name and contact info straight at the top, formatted super cleanly so an employer has no difficulty knowing who they're talking to when they call or email. After that, I get a lot of questions about an objective. So, through a resume certification I went through, they recommended that objectives are not necessary anymore. Really, just be straight to the point and include the job title or a one line statement of what you're applying to. So, for example, seeking the position in the management training program at Target. We don't need a short paragraph or anything about the individual, as that can be put into the cover letter. So after that objective area, we'll go into the education section. For the most part, I have my students or clients put education at the top. However, depending on the job, sometimes that relevant experience is more important than the education. So that might shuffle down a little bit so the experience can go higher. But within each section, so for education, for example, I like to make that heading really different from the other font going on. So I usually bold it and do all caps. And then we list their educational background, whether it's some education at Utah State University, if it's a certificate, an associate's, high school diploma, whatever it might be, we'll include that on there as long as it's still somewhat timely and relevant. For just as an example, for Utah State University students that are done with their freshman year, I recommend they take their high school off at that point because they have education that's more recent and higher than the previous education. So as you're talking with your client, you can help them evaluate what education, if any, they should include up there at the top. So you can see the content there in that education. After that, we include a variety of sections. It really depends on the job that the student or client is applying to. Sometimes you'll want to list their technical skills first. So if they're applying to some sort of a IT support position, it might be helpful to have all of those technical computer skills listed higher so an employer can kind of just check off the different programs they know and even just to show the capacity at which they can learn different programs. You can also have your various work experiences or volunteer experiences listed next. So you'll see on Vanessa's, there's the retail and sales work experience section. So since she's applying to a job at Target, we wanted to highlight her retail experience first. So she has her two most relevant experiences. And within those, let me grab a pencil on here to draw for you. So she has her job title, the company that she worked at, the location, whoops, and the dates. Those are the 4 pieces of information we really want with each experience that's listed. Okay, thank you, Corbin, for fixing those. After you have that line with those 4 pieces of information, then we really want to list the bullet points of accomplishments. And we'll spend a few more minutes on that on the next couple of slides. But this is where the client can really reflect on their success from those different positions, what they did really well, what they accomplished while they were there. And this is also where I like to pull in keywords from the job posting. We'll talk about that in a couple of slides as well. After that retail and sales work experience section for Vanessa, we wanted to highlight her leadership and service. We wanted to show that she's involved in her community as well. So she listed her various, involvement, whether it was on campus, within her church community, just within her larger community in general. These are really great to show. Employers love to see what else the individuals are interested in. These experiences are filled with transferable skills. So that list of top 15, this is a great place to highlight some of those. At the very bottom, she chose to include that she's willing to relocate and that she has a LinkedIn account. That's flexible as well. If they want to include that information at the top, that's okay. Vanessa just liked the balance of that on the page. So that's chronological, and with chronological too, making sure it's most recent in time and then going backwards. We want newer experiences at the top. So then on Jennifer's, that one is the skills-based resume. So if a student or a client has experience that is not relevant, but it is transferable, a skills-based resume can be just as effective. For example, if a student or a client is applying to a position in the real estate area, like if they want to be an assistant at a real estate office, but they've only had food service experience, that's okay. They've gained great customer service, time management, working under pressure. There's so many different transferable skills they have that will apply really well into that real estate area. So the top portion is the exact same from the name all the way through education. But after that, that's where it changes a little. So perfect. Thank you, Corbin. So we have that relevant skills and experience section right in the middle. And that's where you want to think about what are the most transferable skills this client has to offer. Usually they're found right within the job description. So if someone is looking at a job posting and it says they need someone with strong communication, organization and planning, and computer skills, they can create these little subheadings such as writing and editing research. They can really tailor those to the job posting to show their transferable skills. Okay. And then you just list the bullet points. So it's like pulling your chronological bullet points and sticking it into the correct category. And then at the very bottom, the work and leadership section. That's where you basically have your bibliography of all of the places you gained your experiences. So if you have a bullet point under writing and editing, just making sure that where you gained that experience is listed in that work and leadership section. So this style of resume gives an employer a chance to look at all of those transferable skills and accomplishments before looking at where the experience was even gained. Okay. Corbin, are we getting any questions about the difference between those two?
Nope, we're good. We're doing good.
Okay, awesome. So some general formatting tips I like to go through with the clients. Like I said, you want it to be really clean and don't use colors. There's a few reasons for that, but the ones I usually highlight, if the person reviewing applications decides to print off the applications, maybe they don't have the best printer, and then your resume is not looking as clean or as sharp as you want it to. Or if the individual is colorblind, they might not be able to see it as well either. So that's why we say black and white just to be safe. And then if the individual is looking at more creative positions where you're doing some design or web development, that's when you can be a little more creative with the resume. But for the majority of the time, we just use straightforward ones like this. A few places to have them save room if needed. So we do want resumes to be just one page. So we recommend their margins can be as small as a 0.7 inch all the way around, or even their font size. They can change that to be a little smaller, maybe like an 11-point font. So there's a few ways you can play around with formatting. There's no hard rules of what it has to look like. It all boils down to personal preference, but we want to remember, is this easy to skim through? Is it clean? Is it concise? Okay. Okay. So let me make sure I hit all of the tips I wanted to talk about. All right. So let's move on to those bullet points. So how to actually write out those bullet points and have your client really help write those bullet points. Sometimes it can be difficult for us to write these for clients because we don't know all of their great experiences or accomplishments. It all depends how open they are of sharing their experiences and how well they can articulate them to us. So I really like to work on these with the student or the client. And I use this formula where you start with your action verb, such as performed, managed, organized, anything like that, what the responsibility was, and most importantly, the benefit or the result or the outcome. Basically showing how your responsibility was done well, how you were successful in doing that. And that third piece, the benefit result, is oftentimes left off when I'm working with students or clients. So I really have to sit down with them and talk about, what did you accomplish because you managed those schedules or whatever it might be. I want them to really communicate their success. And sometimes it's difficult because they don't feel like they should be bragging about themselves. They feel like they're coming across as, too confident, things like that. And rarely does it come across as too confident on the resume. So through this formula as well, we want to identify any tools or processes that we can. For example, any computer programs, if they used Excel, Adobe Suite, if they had to use heavy tractor equipment, anything like that. We also want to use numbers to show the scope and scale of their success. So if they collaborated on a team of 5, or if they had to manage a budget of $200 in that one volunteer experience. And lastly, these are bullet points, so they're not complete sentences. I work with the clients to make sure they take out any of that first person element. We want it to be very concise and only have the words that are necessary to the meaning. So let's look at an example, and then I'm actually going to have you submit some statements. Okay, so let's say one of your clients has customer service experience, and they had a complaint from a customer. So one of their success statements could be provided excellent customer service while using active listening to understand the customer need or issue in order to resolve the question or complaint most effectively. So we have the verb, which is provided, and it is in past tense. We want to make sure the tense is very consistent across the page, and I'll come back to that. After that, we have the responsibility, which is the excellent customer service while using another skill, such as active listening. And then that benefit or result was resolving that question or complaint most effectively. So we've got those three elements. And as long as the bullet point fits within 2 lines on the page, that's okay. If it goes on to a third line, that's when it gets a little long, and we might want to think about how we can scale it back, be a little more concise, or split it into 2 separate bullet points to highlight 2 different skills. So think through that, submit some, and I'll have Corbin read a couple. And while you're doing that, just to talk about the tense a little bit more, if the client is in a current job, then they can use either past or present tense with their success statements, but they want to be consistent. If it's an experience in the past, it's completely done, then they want to use all past tense. Typically, I tell the students just use past tense across the whole page to minimize the room for error. Employers really do look at the formatting, the typos, basically any reason to eliminate your application and move on to the next one. They might have a stack of 400 resumes to get through. So little inconsistencies like that reflects poorly against their written communication, which is one of those top skills employers look at. So we want clients to have the best chance possible to not have any room for error. Okay, Corbin, if you wouldn't mind reading a couple that have come through, and we'll look at how it fits in with that formula.
Looks like we're still waiting for some comments. So if you could repeat that again, Jillian, while we're waiting for them to type, repeat the question.
Yeah, so, and let me think too, let's see. Oh, okay. So one of the common things I run into with clients as we're working on these success statements. So this is a great chance to pull up the job posting. And on the next page, I'm going to show you an example. But this is where I really pull in keywords. So maybe on this client's resume, they say work with a team of 6, but in the job posting they're wanting to apply to, maybe it says collaborate. Then you just kind of need to look at, what synonyms can I use to really tailor this resume to fit the posting. A lot of times it boils down to just switching some of the action verbs out for wording in the posting instead. Okay.
It looks like we got a few comments. People are saying they like to highlight the client's accomplishments on their resumes. I like to ask my clients to use examples of what they've done and use action verbs to describe them while listing the results of their actions. Certified food handlers while properly using a 3-sync process. Spend time talking about various experiences at jobs and turning those into success statements.
Great. Good. Yeah, one of my favorite things to do as well is just kind of make a list of responsibilities the client or student has done in their various jobs, and then move into these success statements. Several times students they get intimidated by this formula, and a lot of times I can just spit them out really quickly if they tell me a little responsibility they have, and that intimidated a few people that I've worked with. So I like to have them start with the outline, and then let's plug them in together to show them that they can do it. Good. Any other big things you're seeing in there, Corbin, as they're submitting those?
Um, Let's see, rendered superior assistance while catering to customers' requests. They're still coming in, so yeah.
Okay. Okay. I'm sure we'll get lots in there. So um, we'll stop there on that one and we'll keep going just to be aware of the time. So here is an example of a job posting that I found. So this is one of the activities I do with the client as well. If we found a job posting together, if they bring one in, I like to print them off, or like on Adobe or whatever platform you're using. You usually have like the pen tool where you can circle or highlight things. But I like to go through and highlight what are the key words that they're mentioning in this job posting. Do you have this skill? So, for example, when you jump to the responsibilities, support phone calls and emails, I'll ask the student, like in the workplace, have you answered phones? Have you sent emails out? Have you had to track or log information? Have you had to monitor inventory? And I ask them so many questions like that just so I get a better grasp on what we can tailor into that document. And then that's where we then look at those success statements a little bit more. For example, the under qualifications on the right, the second to last one includes organization and problem solving. So we'll change, instead of manage inventory, maybe we'll say organized inventory, just kind of swapping out those keywords. So we want to show the employer I have a clear match of skills to the job you're posting. Um, there's another reason we do this though. A lot of companies, especially large companies, use applicant tracking systems. And what that is, if you're not sure what that means, basically companies can have a software system that will scan all of the applications. They'll match it against the job posting. So if you have like for example, 70% keyword match, and they scan your application in and you get that 70% keyword match, an actual person will then get your application. Before that, if you got like a 60% and you don't meet that 70%, then your application just kind of disappears and you're not moved forward for further review. So we really want to make sure to have those keywords in there. You never know what companies are using those applicant tracking systems. So we want to make sure the client has the best chance possible to get to that interview stage. Okay. And then if there's any skills the students are missing or the clients are missing from this list, we think about, through your classwork, have you had any experience with these? We could potentially weave those into the resume or cover letter. But sometimes we just can't fit everything in, and that's okay. Another element to these job postings is that the company will list everything in the world that they would want uh, this candidate to be able to do, and sometimes it's a little unrealistic. So I help students understand that if you meet like 50 to 70% of the requirements or qualifications, you can still apply, like still feel confident that you could get an interview. The person they describe in this posting just might not exist. Okay. Okay. So just a few reminders about resumes. Um, so through NACE, that National Association of Colleges and Employers I mentioned before, there was also research that showed how long employers spend looking at applications. Resumes get less than a 1 minute scan initially. Realistically, it's about 10 seconds before the employer knows, yes, I want to keep looking at this application, or no, I don't want to look at this anymore. We're moving on to the next one. So keeping in mind that within that less than 1 minute, we really need to capture the attention. So keeping the resume to a page, having really clean and consistent formatting, absolutely no typos, even having a period on the end of some bullet points, but not all of them, that can be a negative. Having those strong success statements. And then with the margins and font, you can change them to be a little bit smaller so that you can include more accomplishments as needed. Okay, any questions about resumes before we jump into cover letters? Okay, I see a few people typing. We'll take one or two questions. And Corbin, if you can read those off as a couple of those come in, that would be great.
So Tanya just mentioned, she made a comment, provides great customer skills, love to work in a team, but can also work independently, kind of referring back to the initial, your previous question.
Oh, great. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So are we okay to move forward then,
I think, yeah,
Corbin?
we'll move forward. If there's a question that comes up, we'll come back around at the end.
Thank you. So cover letters. Cover letters are even more fun for me to help write than the resume. This is really a great chance for the client to show a little personality and really express why they're interested in the position and the organization. A lot of positions do not require a cover letter. And to me, that means you should still submit a cover letter. Um, the only time I suggest not submitting a cover letter is when the posting says do not submit a cover letter. And I've only seen that once. Otherwise, I tell clients submit it as a separate document if there is a place to upload additional documents, or submit it as the second page of the resume so that the reader can view it if they would like to. So with the cover letter, I like to break it into three main sections. It's why them, why you, thank you. So super straightforward with that. And we'll go through this formatting and then look at an example together. And think about what else you like to include in the cover letters with clients. My list is not, all inclusive. There's a few other ways you can go with it. So you can be a little more creative with it. But I like to have the client help write these as well, especially the examples. So with the formatting, we want it to be consistent again. So matching the same font size and style as the resume, and even including the header, which I'll show you on the next example from the resume, so that it looks like a business letterhead. We want it to be super clear and concise. Again, referring back to that list of 15 skills employers really look at, that written communication is one of those top skills. This is an even bigger test than the resume because this one has those complete sentences in it. We want to have that clear grammar and spelling, and then the client does not need to include physical addresses if they're sending it as an attachment or an email. But many people I work with still like to do the very formal business letter format, and that's okay. So the first paragraph is why them. And in that, we want to identify the position they're applying to, if they have any referral or contact, so basically name dropping. A lot of times, the clients I'm working with will have met the recruiter at a career fair, or their cousin worked for that company. Any kind of name drop they can make, but with a purpose, can be really helpful. Mentioning their education is good in this first paragraph. And most importantly, we want to know why they're interested in this position in the company. So, way back at the beginning, when I have the client research why they're even interested in the organization, this is where we use it even more. Um, I want to know, do you want to work for Patagonia, for example, where the sustainable practices is really important, or the really strong company culture where you can, go surfing in the middle of the day. Whatever it might be, we want to incorporate that into here so the company knows this client or this candidate has researched us, they know about us. They're not applying to 100 different jobs. They're applying to us. Okay. Then
Jillian,
in that, yes.
sorry, there's a question that came in regards to resumes and cover letters that if you've been out of school for 10 or more years, do
Mhm.
you need to or should you add your educational experience? What do you think?
That's a great question. So, in the cover letter, you would not need to include the education then, unless it's very relevant and very critical to the job posting. In the resume, you could include it, but towards the bottom, where your relevant experiences would probably be more timely, more recent than the education. Good question. Okay, so in that second paragraph, This is where we want to know why you are the best candidate. So what are 2 to 3 of your strongest qualifications? And what I have the client do at this point is go through the posting again and tell me what are your best qualifications out of the ones they list in here. And then I ask them to give me an example. That's where we start to tell a little bit of a story in this second paragraph and build on that applicable work experience. So instead of just using their success statements from the resume, I have them elaborate on it and paint a little bit more of a picture so that it shows a little more personality. It flows really well. It tells more of a story. Okay. And with the example too, it can be really easy to be long-winded with it. So sticking to 1 page or less is really important on the cover letters as well as the resume. I really enjoy to write these stories with the students or the clients. So I'm really hands-on with this process, but maybe you have different ways to approach that second paragraph in particular. I think some students have an easier time explaining their experiences, and other students have a more difficult time. So this with this section, I really have to adapt to who the student or the client is. Then in the last paragraph, we just thank the employer and request an interview. This is also a chance to include anything else. So if the client is applying to a job, across the state where they would have to relocate, this is a good time to say, I'm excited to relocate and move to XYZ city to kind of put at ease any issues or questions the employer might have initially. This is also a chance to follow up and say, I will contact you in a week if you know who to contact. We've seen many times that not all postings list who you can contact with questions, but if they do, I always encourage the student to put a statement like that, and I'll show you in the next example. Or you can have a simple, thank you for your time. I look forward to hearing from you. However you can follow up is great though. So let's look at an example. And I've
So
got that template. Yes. Do you have
another
a question?
question. Yes, how do you address gaps in employment?
Good question. So if the client has gaps in employment, depending on how big the gaps are, um, so if there's big gaps and maybe a few more gaps than um, the client is comfortable showing, I recommend going with this skills-based resume. So those dates become not as apparent, but they still list the history which the employer does want to see. I have worked with clients that, for example, they were stay-at-home moms returning to the workforce, but we still were able to do a chronological resume because they continued with community engagement while they were staying at home, whether it was like being on the school board for their kids' school, being involved in their church community. They still had various experiences that showed continual engagement, just not paid employment. So for that case, chronological would be okay. For younger clients that maybe are, more freshly out of school or currently in school, those employment gaps do not like they're not as big of a deal because employers understand with schooling, there's just natural gaps while you're finishing up classes or whatnot. But for those that are out of school, more experience, it's just best to choose, is it better for chronological or skills based? Good. Hopefully that answers that question. So, okay. So here's our example. You'll see for Amber Crane at the top, we copy something similar to what a resume heading would be. This is where I recommend the client just copy and paste the heading from the resume so all the documents match. It looks really professional when they're, laying next to each other. Then you've got your date, and then this one we have the job title rather than dear so-and-so or to whom it may concern. So if you know who is reading the letter, we definitely want to put in dear so-and-so, but a lot of times we don't know that. So we recommend putting in the job title to tailor it a little bit. And we think that is better than the to whom it may concern. After that, it's those 3 paragraphs and then the sincerely and the client's name. So this particular one, Amber started right out with her love for wildlife, and she really showed a little bit of her personality up front. That was her personal preference rather than saying, I'm applying to this position. I graduated in this. She wanted to go right into her experience with this national park. So your client doesn't need to follow this bullet pointed list on the left exactly. As long as those elements are in there somewhere, that's all we want. Okay, so take a second to read through that, and you'll have this in the PDF as well. This one is really short just because I wanted it to fit on the screen okay for you, but it can be longer. The one we submitted, the second paragraph would have been a little bit longer to show more of the accomplishments with the strongest qualifications. Okay. Any questions about the cover letter?
We had a comment that came in that they recommend their clients call the business anonymously to ask who the hiring manager is, and then they can address the cover letter directly to that individual.
Yeah. Yeah, clients definitely can do that. I love that suggestion. I typically recommend that clients follow up after they submit an application anyway. I have a slide towards the end about that. But if they submit an application and the close date goes by and they haven't heard anything, there's no harm in calling and saying, I have a couple of questions about the position, and I'm also wondering if I'm still in consideration. Who can I talk to? Most of the time, that you'll be able to get connected to the correct person just to know if you're even being considered still. And then it's always good to have a couple questions prepared anyway. So perfect. Thanks for sharing. So we have just about 10 minutes left, and I want to go through a little bit of networking with you. So with networking, it can be it is so important to the job search. It's really not the best strategy to rely only on the online job search, since you could submit application after application and not hear back. So networking can really leverage it'll give you a better advantage. So different ways that we talk about networking with students using LinkedIn, just calling or walking into an organization and talking to people who are already in your network. A lot of times we know people who work at places we might be interested in. And all of those different places of networking lead to informational interviews for me. And informational interviews, if you're not aware, those are where you set up like a 15-20 minute call or meeting with a professional doing a job that you might be interested in and ask them questions about their career path. What type of opportunities did you do before you worked here? What advice would you give to me? What do you love about this job or company? What are the challenges? Just kind of hearing that person's story, then they know who you are. Through these interviews, you're not asking for a job, you're just asking for the story. And then through that networking, you can leave a really good impression. So when a job does come up, they can refer you, which can be one of the best ways to get into those interviews and getting those positions. So I have a question for you. We'll have a poll question now. Corbin, if you want to pull that over. So the question is, what percent of employers do not respond to all of their applicants? So if an employer has 400 applications to get to, what percent do they not even respond to? Okay, 70, a lot of you were saying the 70%. So this one is actually the 52%. So just a little over half. Say they do not respond to all their applications. And I would guess that if it was a bigger pool, it'd probably be higher because with huge companies, it's just impossible. Or if they do respond, it's just like one of those automated emails. So I want to help students understand networking helps increase your opportunity to actually talk to the employer as well. Okay, we want to have them talk to an actual person, not just hope that they hear back from one of those online applications. Okay, so Let's move on to talk about some strategies on how to do some of that networking. Oh, and a couple fun facts. Well, I maybe they're not fun, maybe they're scary, but so of all of the job postings out there, only 20% are even posted online. So there's this, pool of 80% of these jobs that are in this hidden job market. So I talk to students and clients, how do you tap into that hidden job market when you're only seeing 20% online? And it's this networking, talking to people within the organizations or people you know. A lot of jobs can come through word of mouth, through those references. So 4 out of 5 jobs are not available through the standard online job search either. A lot of times jobs will be posted internally where they hire from within their own organizations. Okay, and then the last one we talked about, 52% of employers say they don't respond. So that can intimidate students. They feel like they have this huge mountain to climb where they have to apply for jobs online and do this networking. So I always talk to them about, do 50-50. 50% of your job search should be online, 50% of the time should be spent networking. So strategies on reaching out, whether they are more comfortable calling or emailing, I like to have the student or the clients write out a draft message of what they would even say if they called or emailed someone to either set up an informational interview or just see if they have any available openings in their company. So we like to go through that email together to make sure they feel really comfortable sending that message. And they can use this on LinkedIn, if they message some people through there. And I like to show them, using the company search feature or also just searching for people. We do all kinds of fun things on there. And I could talk for an hour just about LinkedIn. So I'll kind of just cut it there for LinkedIn. But we also look at the company website to see if there's any sort of directory we could look at, or if they have, an HR representative about their employment opportunities. Anybody we can find within that organization that could lead to a relevant contact, we'll try to contact. And then I have them think about who's already in your network. Where do your friends or family work? Do you, even your professors for students that you taught, stay talking to them first. A lot of times we know people who know really good people to network with, so it's you just have to ask to start out with. Okay, so we brainstorm a list of people at first, and then I like to set, a realistic expectation of how often these messages or calls get responses. So there's kind of 3 types of people that you can reach out to, and this is adapted or it's taken from the 2-hour job search book that's listed on the bottom corner there. But there's the first group, which is like curmudgeons. These are the people that they don't even care. They get your email, they're just going to delete it. They've got a zillion other things to do. And that can be really discouraging when your client's not hearing back. The second type is obligates, and these are individuals that almost have a sense of guilt, like they have to respond because someone else helped them get into the organization and they feel like they have to help that person, pay it back kind of. So the obligates are ones that they'll respond to you, but they don't really want to help. And maybe after one response, they're going to ignore your next response. And then the last group, which is the boosters, this is the group we hope that we can find. These are the individuals that really enjoy their job. They want to help people grow. They will respond and offer to help you any way that they can. So this is the minority group, these boosters. But if we email or reach out to enough people, maybe the obligates will point us to some of those boosters, or maybe we'll be lucky and find some up front. But these boosters can really be a good advocate for your clients once they find organizations that they would be interested in working for. Okay. So from the 2-hour job search as well, I really like this strategy of this 5-point email. We want, when students or clients are reaching out, we want it to be really concise and to the point. So I love this 5-point template, and I go over this with those students and clients, and I have them send me a draft such as the one up here. So you want your emails to be fewer than 100 words, and not even mentioning that you're searching for jobs. just mentioning that you want to learn what it's like to work for that company or what they, what kind of opportunities they got involved with. Then we want to include a connection if there is one. So this student, she was a global communication student at USU, and they found their information through LinkedIn. So LinkedIn was that key thing there. The student generalized her interest, so keeping it broad, and also maintaining control of the follow-up. Being, saying, I understand if you're really busy, so I can reach out to you next week if it's better. Giving that individual almost an out if they just don't have the time or the capacity to help or respond. So a brief email like this could work for an email or a phone call so that we can try to get some informational interviews set up. So quickly, I want to show you with informational interviews. So we really want it to be a learning opportunity with clients. The goal is to gain a contact within that company and learn what they can do to be a stronger applicant when a job does open up. So really focusing questions on that person's story though. So some things with that internal preparation, questions that the student and you, the client, you can prepare together is this Tiara guide. So questions around trends in the industry, insights, so what their experience has been like at that company, any advice that they would give them, any resources they can point them to, and any assignments. What are some projects you've done while you've been employed at this company? So this TR method can give a client a really good perspective of what it's like to work in that industry or that company. And it's very selfless. It's nothing about, I'm looking for a job, I want to work here. It's all about just learning. And then they can take that information and apply it to their future applications. This is a little bit of it's definitely more hands-on, but comparing it to submitting 100 applications versus doing a few really good informational interviews, this networking method, this informational interview method can pay off really well and help those clients land even higher quality positions than what they might find only online. Okay. Okay. So I have one more slide, so I'll rush through it so we have a couple minutes for questions. Just following up. For interviews or applications, it's really important to send follow-up emails to thank the interviewer or the person for their time. Whether it was just, thank you for your time for your interview or thank you for reviewing my application. But we want to make sure the client stays connected to that organization. It shows really good initiative. And if you look at the statistic on here, 20% of hiring managers are less likely to hire candidates who do not send a thank you note after the interview. These thank yous can be really impactful. If there's two candidates that are pretty evenly, measured, the thank you can set them over the edge. It's a really kind and professional step to take after those applications or interviews. So I recommend doing that. And with clients, I usually help them write these as well so that they feel good about sending it. Okay, so I have a few of the websites I like to use up here, and I'll leave that up here while we get any questions for the next minute or two.
Jillian, are you not able to see the chat?
I am not. I just see that people are typing.
Okay, you might want to, in the upper right corner of the chat box,
Okay.
you can close that and then reopen it. So hide it.
Oh, okay.
And then let's see if I can pull
And
it.
then where do we reopen it? Okay.
You see the comments now?
So it's still empty for
Oh,
me.
okay.
I just see people are typing.
Okay. There was a comment about particular individuals active in LinkedIn. Mostly they see technical and technologically based jobs. So I don't know if you wanted to talk about that, about how to diversify the job opportunities and how you utilize LinkedIn.
Yeah. So LinkedIn, there's so many cool features within it. And I would be happy to chat with any of you more about LinkedIn, but it is the number one place for professional networking, and there are tons and tons and tons of job postings in there. Um, Looking for entry level versus seniors a little bit different. They're all within that job tab, but it takes a little bit of playing around to find some. Um, so I would still recommend LinkedIn is one of the best places to be looking, but maybe we could talk more later about how to use it a little, um, focus it a little bit more.
Okay. So we're at the top of the hour here, so thank you, Jillian, for your presentation. You guys can stick around if you have more questions, and Jillian, you'll be able to stick around for a couple more minutes. Is that right?
Yep.
Um, but yeah, thank you so much for joining us. As I mentioned before, you can download the slides at the bottom of the Adobe Connect screen. If you'd like to review this recording at a later date, we'll be posting it on our website at ceiutah.com. So thank you so much, Jillian, for a great presentation. I will be posting the certificate here in just a second if you want to download that for continuing education credit. But thank you all for joining us, and best of luck in your job search process.
Thank you all. And yep, I can stick around for a couple minutes, and I'm starting to see some comments coming in. We got a question if I use the STAR technique for interviews. Yes, I love the STAR technique. I love any formulas I can give to students, like the success statement one or the STAR. And if you're not familiar with that one, it's the situation, task, action, result. I have content around interviews that I could send you as well if you want to email me. But yeah, that's a great way to help students walk through examples just like success statements.